All right, hello everyone. My name is Brian Zavatsky. I am presenting my Twine game and the process in which I created the game. So I decided to, here's my process paper. I decided to create the Twine game using a medieval tournament instead of a game like chess. And I thought this was a good way to kind of show like social, political, and cultural parts of medieval life because medieval life is a lot different than our life today. Um, Bartering was very common for things instead of just paying with coins or cash. There were lots of different social and political classes that kind of showed how much influence you had and affected what kind of life you lived. There were common people, there were nobility, such as lords and barons, stuff like that. And I chose this topic because a medieval tournament's a great way to show how society, politics, and culture is all mixed together because tournaments weren't just about being a fun sporting event. They were places where knights competed to show off their skills, different nobility built alliances, and there is a big social gathering for the commoners to watch and have fun. And people made money, they traded things, built a reputation. Um, so there's jousting, strategic games. It's all kind of the main parts of a medieval tournament, as well as food and celebrations and feasts. So, in regards to my primary sources, there was one called Game On Medieval Players and Their Texts by Patterson. And this book discusses different culture and societal meanings of the different kinds of games in the Middle Ages, which included jousting. And she also describes how these games helped people build up their status, show their status, connect politically with other levels of nobility, and kind of shows the values of that time period. And the other primary source I used was Froissart's Chronicles. This was a translated document, and he wrote that during the Hundred Years' War, and described parts of the medieval aristocratic life, such as tournaments, jousting tournaments. And he really goes into depth about how the tournaments worked, how knights worked, how nobles acted, and how they all tied together, as well as how the common people looked at tournaments. They kind of showed that it was more of a game to watch, like Americans watch football. That was what it was like for the common people, and then your knights were your football players, and then your coaches and team owners were like nobility. So he kind of describes how it all ties together. And then by reading these accounts, I got a sense of how knights prepared, how they dressed, and how seriously the different levels, or the cultural levels and societal levels, took these events. When I say cultural and societal levels, I'm talking about nobility, knights, and just the common people, like peasantry. So when I use these sources in the game, I use that Patterson's book inspired the idea that a tournament is more than just a contest of strength for the knights. It was like a big social and political game as well. So I wrote parts of the game in Twine where the players' actions, like how they behave at feasts, who they befriend in the tournament, and how they handle their political and social alliances, mattered just as much as the actual jousting itself. And then with Froissart, I included that the details made the setting feel real, and he described how knights entered the lists, how they challenged each other, and how you either earned or lost honor as a knight to create more believable scenes in my Twine game. And when the player decides whether to fight fairly or be sneaky and cunning, the consequences feel grounded in an actual medieval mindset at the time. And with other scholars who use these sources. They use Froissart's work to understand chivalry and how aristocrats, which is nobility, showed off their values and communicated with one another. And they see the tournaments as a theater performance where the noble class performed for an audience. And they also look at Patterson's research to understand the deeper social meanings of games and play in the Middle Ages. So I combine these approaches because historians usually write articles and books and with the sources, and I'm using the sources to build more of an interactive story. And this kind of encourages the player to think like historians and put themselves in a position of an actual medieval knight to kind of see how they had to work within their limits to create alliances and political power. So in my game, you start as a new knight who has just arrived at a big tournament, and you've never been to a tournament before, and you get to see how all the peasantry, nobles, guilds, and merchants are gathered together. And you, before you start your joust, you can talk and make friends with other people and purchase things. Also, I use some secondary sources, such as Guerin, where he discussed how ivory from certain mammals were used as a currency because it was highly sought after. And my main idea is that the medieval tournament was not just a sporting event, it was a social and political gathering. And by making their choices in the game, players will see that success depends on more than how well you fight, but also how you behave, who you befriend, and whether you can follow or challenge society's expectations of the time. I also want there to be some unpredictability in the world, because just because you're a great knight and people like you and you're good at jousting doesn't mean that everyone's going to like you. Some nobles might not like you and they might plot behind your back. The common people might not like you if you're trying to just please the nobles. And you can also befriend different knights. And then in regards to traditional history classes, it's typically reading essays, listening to lectures, and writing papers, which I thought was very one-dimensional, which is great about this class, where you can create a game that makes you think about history a lot more than just reading something and writing about it. You're actually creating options for the choices that you make in the game. Some of the limitations that I had was that it's very difficult to get super detailed with things. I don't believe I was super detailed. I could have made much more choices, and I wanted to, but with time limitations and reaching the word count, I could have easily gone to 4,000 plus words, but I did not want my game to be too long and complex, because even while I was creating the game, I noticed some points where different decision trees weren't connected very well, and I had to remove some, create new ones. And although I did write it out before I created the game, it was still very difficult to tie all the choices together. And so to conclude my process portion, the Twine game taught me that transforming historical research into an interactive story is a very unique challenge. This is something I've never done before. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, so I will get into my Twine game. So here is my decision tree. This portion of the game starts with kind of talking to people, purchasing things, building connections at the start, and then the game itself goes around here. And then towards the end of the game, you attend a feast. You can either sit with the lesser knights who also competed with you. You can sit with the commoners. You can sit near the Lord, and these all affect how the game ends. And then I have my works cited down here. So I'll do a quick run through of the game. Alright, test from here. So the game starts, you're in a grassy field, kind of describes where you're at and who you're with. You have a mentor named Sir Reynard, and I have my sources here. So I will first approach the noble stands. You can speak to the Lord. There's the lady of the Lord, the Baron's assistant of the Lord. So if I speak to the Lord, you can start building favor with him. You can hint that you want his support, and he's a little bit suspicious of you, but he doesn't turn you away and expects you to prove yourself first in the jousting tournament. So we go to the jousting list, and you're both on horseback, facing an opponent. Both have lances, and it gives you two options. You can either charge honorably into him, or you can try a clever trick on him. So if I charge honorably, I knock the opponent off his horse with the joust, and not only does the crowd cheer, but the nobles are also cheering, because you could have played a trick where you dodge him and knock him off your horse, but you went the honorable route and still won. So then we attend the feast. So there's meats, wine, bread, music, laughter. So the Lord Ulrich, you can either sit with him, you can sit with the lesser knights, or the common folk. So let's say we sit with the commoners, give you bread and alcohol. They talk about their hard lives and how the tournament brings money to the town, because you have a lot of foreigners and people competing to bring more money in. It's kind of like tourism. So let's say I'm feeling very generous. I can give them some of my winnings, and they are surprised and grateful. Acts of kindness might lead to good rumors about you, shaping how others see you. And this gives you the commoner ending. So the people all support you, but the Lord and the lesser knights are more suspicious of your motives. And this is because the Lord might think you were trying to overthrow him by getting the people on your side, or the knights might be more suspicious for the same reason. And then it leads me to the bibliography. These are the sources I used. And then go back to the game. So you can also sit near the Lord, and this gives you a different ending where the Lord takes a liking to you. But then that makes the common people and the knights more suspicious of you, because they think you're just trying to gain power and you don't care about them. You also have the knight ending where you befriend the lesser knights, and they all take a liking to you, but just like the other two endings, the other two groups of people are suspicious of your motives. And so these different choices kind of all tie in together at the end. There's also, where is it? Right here. So this is where you barter with a merchant. Gives you good luck and gives you some ivory, and then it brings you back to the jousting list, and it all ties in together. So there's a lot of different options you can take during the game. There's a lot of different choices you can make, and they all have different effects on the ending. And then if you try the clever trick, this is during the jousting portion of it. You dodge the opponent at the last moment, which knocks him off his horse, because he's expecting to put his joust against you. And this leads some people to cheer you on because they like trickery, and other people boo you. And the higher class might not like this, such as nobles. And it brings you back to the feast. and you can make your choices again. And so this is the gist of my game, and thank you.